Once in a while, I have the pleasure to introduce the speaker, as is the case tonight. But tonight, for me, is a special case because my professional and personal relationship with the speaker goes back at least 13 years. The speaker tonight, Todd Richardson, who got his education, first of all, in Berkeley at the Graduate Theological Union, and later at Leiden University in the Netherlands, where I actually happened to be his advisor for his PhD, which he received in 2007 on a subject that was very dear to me as well, a painter from the early 16th century. Maybe some of you know the painter Peter Bruegel, who is well known for his haunting images of the seasons. The dissertation was published in 2011 with Ashgate, and is, I hear, very, very successful. Todd is an art historian, as I am, and while our first meetings, I remember the first meeting with him was in 2009 on what is called Holy Hill, which is a special place in Berkeley, in California, in the surroundings of the Graduate Theological Union. And Todd came up to me basically saying that he would want to study with me Netherlandish art. He coming from Memphis, Tennessee, I coming from Holland. There was a kind of strange coincidence, we thought at the time, but actually that turns out not to be the case because our trajectory, professional trajectory, went through after, had continued long after he finished his PhD. Todd actually returned to Memphis, Tennessee, where he became an assistant professor, specialized in Renaissance and Baroque art at the University of Memphis, where he's actually also currently assistant dean, probably soon also assistant dean, but right now assistant chair. I'm saying this because one of the beautiful characteristics of Todd is that he's enormously versatile. And normally you sum up the achievements of a professor, of a young professor, already being assistant chair of the department, having published a book and a lot of articles and reviews and so forth and so forth. But in this case, Todd was asked by a very influential member of the society in Memphis to become co-director of an enormous development project that when I heard about it a couple of years ago, immediately I thought there is some relationship between what NYU is doing here in Abu Dhabi. Because what our charge is, if you will, is not only become an excellent university that serves not only the interests of NYU itself, but also of this country. The charge of NYU is actually to reach out to the general audience, the general public, and generate academic discussions on who we are together, not only who we are as Emirati, if you forgive me that phrase, but who we are all together in this enterprise where soon NYU will start its campus, its new campus in 2014 on Sariyat Island, where there will also be very important museums, the Guggenheim, the Louvre, Zayed Museum, and perhaps later also a large performing arts center. And in the vision of the leaders of this country, art and culture take prime place in the development of, if you would call it, the new Abu Dhabi. And there was a direct relationship between that vision and the vision that has been developed in Memphis, Tennessee, regarding a huge building that is supposed to be transformed into a center of art and culture, a vibrant center that will also draw together retail, businesses, university, etc., become a center of cultural life in Memphis, and I would dare say probably far beyond. So when I introduce to you today Todd Richardson as co-director of that huge project, the best way to introduce him is actually to listen to what he has to say about the project, and you will understand what huge task he is facing. Todd, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Reindert, and thank you everyone for taking the time to be here. Thanks also to Nils Lewis and NYU Abu Dhabi, and especially the Institute for bringing me here all the way from Memphis, Tennessee. What I'm going to talk to you about tonight is really not only the past, present, and future of a building, but also the past, present, and future of a city. And to a certain degree, our city in Memphis is representative of many cities across the country. So to understand what we hope to accomplish with the Crosstown Project is to understand the nature of American cities in the 20th century, what fueled their growth, what precipitated their decline, and how we feel that the arts, among many other factors, can revive them from the inside out. So tonight what I want to do is tell you, or to describe to you, two stories that have been unfolding for the last 2.5 years. In early 2009, I came together with a group of development team members, people in engineering, in architecture, in city planning, and in real estate development, to figure out what to do with this building. On the top, you see the Sears building, which was built in 1927. It is 1.5 million gross square feet. I'll come back to that scale in just a minute to give you some comparisons for what that is about. As I'll tell you, it's been abandoned for about 20 years. It sits in the center of the city. So we came together as really civic leaders to try to figure out what to do with this building because of all of the negative consequences that it's had on the surrounding area because it's been abandoned. But as you can see from the bottom picture, what we've been up to is not just about developing a building. You see here a block party that was celebrating the installation of a sculpture called Beacon. The sculpture was created by two local artists, Eli Gold and Colin Kidder. What they did is they took 51 bicycle wheels, repurposed them, turned them into miniature windmills, put them in a sphere, and mounted it on top of the pole. And when the wind blows, it looks literally like a diamond glittering in the sun. The project was funded by an event that we hold annually, Crosstown Arts, that is. This event is called Memphis, not Memphis, but Memphis. FEAST is an acronym for Funding Emerging Artists with Sustainable Tactics. The idea is very simple. We put out a call for public works of art that artists want to make in the community. We put together a selection committee that selects 8 of those projects. Then we have a big party. We have a big dinner. This one actually is taking place in the Sears building. I forgot I actually have a clicker here. There we go. This is actually inside the Sears building. So we have this party. The selection committee selects 8 of those proposals. During dinner, those 8 artists present to the group. They've paid $25 each for food, drinks, and a ballot. After dinner and after the projects have been pitched, everyone in the audience, here about 300 people, votes for their favorite project, and whoever gets the most votes gets $5,000 to make their work. Funny thing is that Eli and Colin actually didn't win. They came in second. This woman, a local artist in Memphis, won that night, and she lit the Sears building up like a disco ball using solar-powered LED lighting. What happened was, this fella here on the left, he liked Colin and Eli's project so much that he donated $3,500 to Crosstown Arts to pay for them to make their sculpture and to mount it. And I tell you this story because I think it's an important example of what is possible, and that is the unpredictable. That is when development or building development or commercial real estate development is about not just redeveloping a building, but also building community, when building is used both as a noun and a verb. This is just a small example of an entire movement in the United States right now when it comes to community building and art making. This image is from the opening night of something called Art Prize in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's in its 4th year now. And the concept is simple. There is a huge prize, a total of about $560,000, a top prize of $250,000 for the best artwork. And what happens is, at least this year what happened is, 1,700 artists made 1,500 works of art, installed them all across the city in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Every nook and cranny was open for people to be able to install their work. It attracted 250,000 visitors to the city to come look at these works of art over the course of about 3 weeks. And as you look at it, you can actually vote on your favorite works via cell phone and other technologies. And at the end of that 3 weeks, the top art prize is given, and again, about 250,000 people. So while $560,000 seems like a big sum, especially when assigned to the arts, imagine how much the city actually made from that many visitors coming to their city to actually eat, to stay in their hotels, to buy their gas, and all of those things. So art is not just about the object. It's not just about going to a museum to see it. It's not just an attraction. But both with Memphis and with things like Art Prize, and there are 100 different variations between Memphis Small, Art Prize Huge. But the point is that you're opening up both the creative process and the judging of artworks to a greater group of people. Rather than artists applying for funds through a foundation where 3 people decide behind closed doors what's good and how much they deserve, you're opening it up to the public. The public gets involved in the creative process, and it becomes interesting in a whole new way. So with Crosstown Arts, what we do and why we exist is really for 2 things. One is to facilitate a feasibility study for the Sears Crosstown building, which took place almost 2 years ago. The other was to further cultivate the arts and music in Memphis by supporting and showcasing local artists, and we do this through concerts, through lectures, and special events. But enough about the arts for now. I'll come back. First thing is, where is Memphis, Tennessee? Memphis is located in the center of the country in the southeast. It's located about a 5-hour drive south of St. Louis, a 5-hour drive north of New Orleans, on the Mississippi River, in some of the most fertile soil that exists in the country. The city was founded in 1819 on one of the highest bluffs along the Mississippi River, called the 4th Chickasaw Bluff. Because it was basically flood-free, and also because of its central location, it almost immediately became a hub for transportation and distribution. It was the cotton capital, still is the cotton capital of the United States. At one time, it was the hardwood lumber market, the largest hardwood lumber market in the entire world. With distribution and transportation in his heritage DNA, a man named Fred Smith, back in the early 1970s, went to Harvard Business School, wrote a master's thesis on a new company that would specialize in distribution services. His professor gave him a C, which is not great, because the professor said that the company that you create has to be feasible. It has to be something that could actually happen. Well, now we know this company to be FedEx, which is in the anchored and headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee. So, of course, cotton and goods and lumber was not the only thing Memphis is known for in terms of what is distributed from there. It's also the place where all sorts of music genres came together to create music that really has defined American culture since. It's the birthplace of blues, of soul music, and of rock and roll. Many renowned musicians are from there. Elvis Presley, B.B. King, Jerry Lee Lewis, Aretha Franklin, Isaac Hayes, Johnny Cash, Al Green, and Justin Timberlake, just to name a few. So this is downtown Memphis today. home to almost 700,000 inhabitants within the city limits and about 1.3 million in the metropolitan area. It is referred to as America's distribution center. It is the place using rail, road, river, and air as the central means. It's a place where more goods come in and out of than any other city in the country, and the second most worldwide. So it's transportation and distribution that was one of the reasons why Sears and Roebuck Company chose Memphis as one of its distribution hubs back in 1927. And we'll get to what Sears is just in case those of you may not know. But first of all, this is downtown Memphis just after World War II. It's a time when all of the activity from shopping, from businesses, from local government was located in the downtown of the city. This is a 1920s map of Memphis. You see on the left the Mississippi River, where it's located next to. The city goes east, and the star is where the Sears building is located. So when Sears chose Memphis as its distribution hub, it chose not to be in the downtown center, but actually at this time on the outskirts of the city next to a railroad. Now, why did they need a railroad? What was Sears and Roebuck? Sears and Roebuck Company, think Amazon 1920s. It was a place where you could get gowns, you could get guns, you could buy a home that was put together, you could buy your tombstone, you could buy lingerie, you could get anything that you needed, you got from Sears and Roebuck Company. Yes, there were retail stores, but what they were really in the business of was getting goods to people through their mail order and catalog and distribution. So this is a picture of the Sears building as it was being built in 1927. When it opened in 1927, the original building was 640,000 square feet. On opening day, about 30,000 Memphians toured it. It had three primary functions: a retail store, as you see here on opening day, as well as the Southeastern Regional offices, and then warehouse for distribution throughout the Southeast. Over the course of time, between 1927 and 1965, Sears and Roebuck continued to invest in their asset, and also a time when Memphis continued to grow and prosper. So over the course of about 40 years, another 900,000 square feet of space was added on to the west side of the building. When you put 2,000 people in a place like this, it has a huge impact on the crosstown area. So Memphis is divided up in all sorts of neighborhoods and areas, and crosstown is an area that is just next to downtown, between downtown and what's called Midtown. So this is a photo from 1950s when Sears was at its height. Crosstown was literally the intersection of the city. You had to go through it going from one place to another, and it was a vibrant community. But the distribution center, I just want to make clear, wasn't just a distribution center. It was already a community in and of itself. This is the cover of a newsletter, basically, that was printed and distributed in the building on a monthly basis. And basically, it served to share their stories, because, of course, a community is more than just a building. A community is interactions, it's exchanges, it's chance encounters, it's shared experiences. And so what this newsletter served as, because there were 2,000 people in the building, they shared their stories. So on the right, they shared weddings. On the left, you see they shared birth. On the top left, you see a picture of somebody getting pie in their face, because different departments would compete, and at the end of the month, whoever lost, the employees got pies in their faces. 3 employees participated in a ceramics contest at Bellevue Baptist Church, and they each won prizes. On the right, a woman's employee's husband goes off to the Vietnam War. They even kept each other accountable. Department 188 has the highest accident record in the Memphis plant, but they're working on it. So it was a community where they praised each other. They also kept each other accountable. And this is why Sears was so successful. In its golden age, it was just that. It was more than just a plant, a distribution center. It was a community, and it was a community that grounded one of the most vibrant and central neighborhoods in the city of Memphis. 1967. 1967, Memphis continued to expand east. And so what Sears decided to do was to add another Sears store further east. And so as you can see here, this was a new retail store that Sears built. Across the road, all you see are trees and grass. Well, now this place, even though this was basically the suburbs, now this is in the center of the city. So we started out with Sears distribution center being built in basically the suburbs. 40 years later, it's in the center of the city. This is the suburbs, and now today, this is in the center of the city. What happened? People started moving out. People started moving away from traditional centers of economic and the community. They moved out and created suburbs for all sorts of reasons, all sorts of legitimate reasons. Bigger house, bigger car, bigger yard, cheaper price. No matter what the reason was for moving out, the consequences of that for the center of the city was clear. And that is less traffic, less people equals less revenue. And in 1983, the Sears retail store closed. In 1993, the distribution center, Sears closed all of their distribution centers across the country. And so since 1993, the building looks about like this, as it's been abandoned for about 20 years. This is a shot from the roof of the Sears building, looking down Cleveland, which was the main corridor, not only in the Crosstown area, but also in the city itself. When you take 2,000 people away from a place that had it for so long, it has huge economic impacts. It wasn't too long after 1993 that stores began to close, storefronts began to be boarded up, and the place, the Crosstown area, became completely disinvested. The issue is that a place is never completely abandoned. There's always people who either don't want to leave or who can't leave. There's always a cost also to the city as a whole for abandoned buildings. But most importantly, the problem is that people lose those things that connect them. Again, interactions, chance encounters, shared experiences. When a place is completely disinvested, not only is it about the economy, but it's also about community because people become disconnected. So it was really community development that was the central mission when Crosstown Arts was formed in 2010. We knew that if we just sat in a room and came up with a strategy for redeveloping this massively huge building, that would only be half the story. That would only be half the work. That what we had to do was begin to bring people back. After 20 years of an abandoned building and this slow disinvestment over the area, 2 years ago, 90% of Memphians couldn't have even told you where Crosstown was. It had completely fallen off the mental map of citizens, even though it had been such a vibrant place just 25 years before that. So what we began to do through Crosstown Arts is have events that activated the place as much as led this feasibility study for the redevelopment of a building. And we began bringing people back to Crosstown. This is a dance competition next to the building where about 2,000 people came out to see it. Well, what we were really shocked at was the response. We had no clue that there were so many people in the city of Memphis who were just like us, young professionals who were yearning for an improved urban life, a place where you could walk to a grocery store, walk to school, walk to work, not have to get into a car. And people began to come. Our first event we had was about 60 people. Our second event was about 300 people. Later, a few months ago, was 2,000 people. And then about 2 weeks ago, we had an event where 8,000 people came out to just hang out next to this building. So back in May of 2010, not only did we begin having events, but we began bringing development team together to think about this building. So this is just one representation of the folks who have spent hundreds, thousands of hours over the course of the last 2 years to try to develop a plan that would bring this building back to life. While Memphis has lost population in terms of its numbers, the center city and the downtown areas, as we know from the census in 2010, has increased by 25% of those who are 18 to 35. So young professionals, young people are no longer interested in the suburbs, but are much more interested in the downtown area. Just to pause for a second and to articulate what our mindset was. So we are Crosstown Arts. I'm an art historian. I'm co-director of Crosstown Arts. My other co-director is an artist. He's a video artist. What we're doing with the Crosstown building is less about traditional commercial real estate development, but it's less about arts, really, as you would traditionally understand it. But it's about combining the two, and it's about combining the creative process to a place. It's about recognizing something that has been abandoned, something that has been forgotten, something that is simply of the everyday, seeing within it beauty, something new, seeing it from a new perspective. And it's this that people are really attracted to. So we were surprised that there were so many people who were interested in what we were doing. We were even more surprised that a 1.5 million square foot building, instead of repelling people, it actually attracted people. The mystique of it drew people more and more over time. Now, in terms of scale, let me pause just a second to say, give you some local examples of what 1.5 million square feet is. On the left, the Leaning Tower, Capitol Gate. The Sears building is 3 of these. On the right is the newer Landmark Tower, which is 1.6 million square feet. So the Sears building is about the same as the tower on the right, as well as the Monorat on Saadiyat Island. The Sears building would be about 10 of these. The Sears building in Memphis was one of 10 of these buildings that were built across the country. 5 of them by the same architect, all of the same size. Actually, our Sears building is the smallest. Fortunately for us, 4 have been redeveloped, so we get to learn from all of their mistakes. So of the 10, 3 have been torn down, 3 are still empty, and 4 have been redeveloped. So I'll just show you, go real quick. In Seattle is the headquarters of Starbucks. In Los Angeles is empty. Dallas is 450,000 square feet of residential. Kansas City is demolished. Minneapolis is mixed-use residential, office, and retail. It's the headquarters of a line of healthcare system, which has most of the square footage. Chicago was the mothership. It was 3 million square feet, and it's now demolished. Memphis is empty. Atlanta is empty, but it's also under development. Philadelphia has been torn down, and Boston is the Landmark Center. So, for example, in Minneapolis, this is called the Midtown Exchange now. It opened in 2007, office, residential, and retail. Starbucks is the headquarters for the Sears building in Seattle. Dallas was one of the earliest buildings, 1913, and so it looks a little bit different, but it's still nevertheless the same size. And then Boston, the Landmark Center, which houses Blue Cross Blue Shield, a healthcare insurance company, about 500,000 square feet. Memphis is a different city. It's not Boston, it's not Seattle, it's not Dallas, it's not Minneapolis. These are all much bigger markets. The other issue is that all of these other developments took what's called an anchor tenant approach, which basically means you attract a large tenant that takes up most of the space, which helps in the economics and at least the immediate viability, and then spread around, or at least fill in the spaces that are around. We also knew in our feasibility study that these are different economic times in Memphis, and so the prospect of attracting an anchor tenant was also very difficult. So our development team from the beginning had to think outside the box. 1.5 million square feet in Memphis, Tennessee. What's possible? What's viable? We knew that we couldn't take an anchor tenant approach. So what we very quickly decided to do was, rather than think about redeveloping a building, we thought about developing a community. So rather than thinking about the space itself, we began to think about the people and the activities that could fill it. This is on the side of the Sears building now. Rather than thinking about empty space, we began to think about not just activities, but what are the activities that Memphis is known for? What are the activities that are germane to our local culture? So rather than taking an anchor tenant approach, what we decided to do was to attract more neighborhood scale uses. So not small, still around 100,000 square feet. Rather than one anchor tenant, recruit 8 or 9. And rather than just 8 or 9 neighborhood scale uses coexisting, moving beyond mixed use coexisting and actually attracting groups, organizations who share mission and vision and therefore would be interested, excited about being next to each other, sharing space and sharing resources. It was also around this time that I was introduced to a concept called urban magnets. I went to Vancouver, Canada, to visit a architecture and design firm, people that we were thinking about hiring for the Sears building. And I met a man named Alan Boniface. Alan is a proponent of this idea of urban magnets. What they argue is, while previously development was all about the form, it was all about the building, it was all about the design, it was all about what was going to be on display there and attracting people through the form. They turned things on its head and began to think about placemaking, or as they call it, creative placemaking, as first and foremost about people, about local people, about the activities that people like to do. And then they studied urban places all across North America, and what they were trying to figure out is, why do some urban places succeed over a long period of time, 30, 40 years, and other urban places are extremely successful for 10 or 15 years, but then go away? The best American example are malls. Malls in the late 80s and early 90s were enormously popular and enormously successful. In Memphis alone, in the last 5 years, 5 malls have gone bankrupt and are abandoned. 2 are being demolished and turned into industrial sites. Now, why is that? Why are some places successful over 30 or 40 years, and why are other places successful for a short period of time and then go away? Well, what they came to find is that urban places that are successful over a long period of time tend to have 5 main ingredients. These 5 main ingredients are retail, but not just any retail. Retail that's grounded in the local, grounded in local culture, grounded in the strengths of local craftspeople or whatever it is, but retail that is more local in nature. They also say that it's something about our DNA that where we buy something, where we consume something, we also want to see something being made. So that retail next to production is really important. The third component is education. So not only do you buy it, not only are you seeing it made, but you can learn yourself how to make it. So there's retail, production, and education. The fourth component is events and programming, so festivals, concerts, things around whatever it is your magnet is. And the fifth is that these places generally have historic or unique architecture. So I show you here just an example of food. So interesting thing is that Granville Island was a former industrial site. If you go there, there is nothing to look at in terms of the buildings. They're actually kind of tin shacks. It is now the second most visited place in Canada behind Niagara Falls. Over 6 million people a year go to Granville Island. Why? The people at Dialogue Architecture and Design Firm would argue because it takes advantage of this idea, or at least it has these 5 ingredients. So their urban magnets are food, boat making, and art. And in each one of those magnets are these 5 ingredients. So here you see there's a food market, an annual food market. There's food being produced. There's a culinary school. There's the food helps to make the form, the spatial form around it. And there's regular events. I became enamored with this idea of these 5 ingredients. And so we sought to implement it in our Crosstown project. And we began to refer to the Crosstown project as a vertical urban village. So the way that you would think about all of the vibrant things that happen in neighborhoods or in urban places, rather than that taking place horizontally, stacking them up on top of each other in the 10 floors that make up the Sears building. And so not only about this urban magnets concept, not only about a vertical urban village, but it would be a place where these 5 ingredients would take place. In this place in our city, in the center that had been forgotten. So this was the vision that I began to take to local organizations, churches, nonprofits, businesses, banks, law, anybody that would listen. I had about 300 meetings over the course of about 2 years. After 2 years, 9 organizations stepped up to partner together to become what we now call founding partners. 9 out of 300, not a great batting average, but nevertheless. They committed to each other and to the development team to occupying 650,000 square feet of the 900,000 square feet that will be redeveloped by the Crosstown project. So these 9 founding partners are St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, a world-renowned hospital for children who are suffering from terminal illnesses. ALZAC is their fundraising arm. And then I'll go through a few of these, but I leave this list up simply to say that what began to emerge over the course of 2 years is a vertical urban village grounded in arts, education, health, and wellness. Gestalt Community Schools is a charter school management organization that will start and operate a high school 9th through 12th grade for arts and sciences. Memphis Teacher Residency is a graduate program in Memphis where, just as an aside, Memphis is the epicenter of education reform going on in Memphis, Tennessee, in the country. And Memphis Teacher Residency is a program that attracts recent graduates from across the country who are interested in urban education, gives them tuition free, a master's in urban education, residential for free, and a stipend for them to then commit to teaching in Memphis urban schools for 3 years after that. So it's an organization that's attracting young talent to Memphis and then guaranteeing they stay there for 4 years. The Church Health Center is a 25-year-old organization whose mission is to provide health care to the working uninsured. They have a wellness center, a primary care, and all sorts of other health care provisions. They operate out of 11 different buildings, and so they will consolidate all of their operations into the Sears building. The West Clinic is our premier cancer treatment center. They have partnered with us to move their new comprehensive cancer treatment center inside the Sears building. Just read you. Patients receiving treatment for cancer at the West Clinic will attend nutrition classes at the Church Health Center. Members of the Church Health Center will discover the healing power of the creative process in classes and exhibitions at Crosstown Arts. Students at the Crosstown High School for Arts and Sciences will be educated in a community where they rub shoulders with doctors, artists, and teachers in training on a daily basis. Educators and medical residents will live in close proximity to their classrooms and their clinics. So I read you this because it's a great example of the fact that what these organizations realized is they were much more than simply the sum of their parts. That when put together, they actually become better individually because they're together. Rather than operating in silos, hospital over here, production over here, arts over here, office over here, residential over here, which is the way that we tend to plan communities, these people realized that by being together, they could share their programs and be better off as a result. Just a couple of slides on numbers. This allows me to talk about uses in the building rather than actual tenants. So we see that health and wellness, residential, academic, arts, office, and retail, and the percentages that make up these uses. Another big component of the building of this vertical urban village will be residential, from student housing to market rate apartments to higher amenity living up on the 10th floor. And I'm happy to report that as of today, 72% of this square footage has been committed to. So while the building is 1.5 million gross square feet through light wells and atriums, it will be reduced down to 1 million square feet. 900,000 square feet of that is rentable. And so we have about 620,000 square feet of that is committed to by our 9 founding partners. At this point, what we're doing is working with our architects, our engineers, our commercial real estate developers to come up with a concept plan that meets the needs of all of these founding partners. So they are meeting with all of the founding partners to figure out how many employees, what their needs are. Our architects have estimated that just based on the needs of the founding partners, there will be between 2,500 and 3,000 people in this building from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. on a daily basis. Quick context. The Sears building is located not just in the center of Memphis. It's located not just in Crosstown, but 75% of it is surrounded by 3 distinct historic districts. This is Evergreen Historic District, Valentine Evergreen Historic District, and Speedway Terrace. And historic districts are districts that have existed for over 50 years, that are highly organized and highly densely populated. And so our hope is that because of this development in the middle of Crosstown, which is now one of the poorest communities in the city of Memphis, on the other hand, it's also, in terms of positive, one of the most, if not the most, ethnically diverse districts in the city. So it's a huge strength for the city. The hope is that a development like this will be catalytic for other development in bringing about the community. Zooming out just a little bit more, the river is on the left. You see Crosstown in the middle in the yellow. St. Jude is just 2 miles west of the building, Rhodes College just a mile east, and then Methodist Hospital just a mile south. It is no accident that these are 3 of our 9 founding partners. The areas that these 3 founding partners are in are actually great areas. Downtown has an enormous amount of development, was going on in 2000, and then 2008 hit, but now is ramping back up. The medical district where the Methodist Hospital is located never stopped. Over $2 billion of investment has been going on there for the past 10 years. And then Midtown, just to the east of Crosstown where Rhodes College is a vibrant area, one of the oldest communities in the city. But between all of this is Crosstown, which is a place that is completely disinvested, kind of the donut hole, the empty space. If you map all of the neighborhood stakeholders, they make a horseshoe around this area. So again, the Sears building in the middle of it is an opportunity to repopulate it and to reanimate it. And so we really see Crosstown as the last variable in bringing together a city center that is active and vibrant and continues to draw the young talent into the center of the city as it has been increased over the last 10 years by 25%. I'll end with this paragraph. Back to today. This is our beacon sculpture that we started out with. So the artist that made the sculpture being installed in this photo named it Beacon. They wanted it to draw attention to the neighborhood. The reality is that a sculpture can only attract interest for so long. We know this to be true for buildings, and we especially know this to be true for the 14-story, 1.5 million square foot abandoned building behind it. Things aren't beacons, people are. Ultimately, what will give people a reason to return to Crosstown is other people. It's the activities, not just the form. We've seen it already with the thousands who have attended our Crosstown Arts events over the last 2 years. It's the social interactions and memories made by those living and working, learning and teaching, healing and growing, creating and recreating in the building 24/7, 365 days a year. These are the shared experiences that will make up the Crosstown community, a place unlike any other where arts, healthcare, and education and people of every age, race, economic status, and background will cross paths. Thank you very much.
What started this process out at the very beginning? What brought together the people that started out the Crosstown Development, in its infancy? You guys have got a great group of people together. You've got some fantastic ideas to develop this project. But what actually started this in its heyday?
It was really a consortium of, I always say it was kind of a perfect storm. About 3 years ago, the conversation happened. There were a number of things going on in Memphis that were really arts and culture related that were going to require building. An artist named William Eggleston, who's a photographer, father of color photography, and important artist, international artist, is from Memphis. And so there was talk about building a standalone museum for William Eggleston. There was another project going on, which is a multidisciplinary artist residency program, where artists are given room and board and a place to make their work in exchange for engaging the community through open studios or public lectures. And so that was another program, and a few other things. And so we began to ask, well, what if all of this happened in the Sears Crosstown building? I can't emphasize enough the personal connection that people have with this building. So many people either worked there, or their families moved there because their parents worked there, or they lived next to it. It's a massive building in the middle of the city, in the midst of these neighborhoods, and so there's always talk. What can happen with the Sears building? And so we began to think, well, what if? Well, this is also a time that this notion of creative placemaking was beginning to catch some ground. The Center for Creative Community Development out of Williams College, they completed a study, which was case studies of arts and culture projects across the country that were successful in and of themselves, but more importantly, they were successful for reanimating, bringing people back to the center of these urban places that had been left behind. And so we began to see through these case studies that it's not just altruistic, it's actually economic, that real estate values increase, that levels of education increase, that quality of life increases. And so we got together with the owner of the building and began to show him these models from across the country, and said, well, the arts is not going to take up a million square feet, not even 100,000 square feet, not even 50,000 square feet. But it could be the thing that gets things going. Could be the spark, and it could be the component that really defines the identity of the place. And so that's really how it started, was a conversation, what ifs. Wouldn't it be cool if? How many times we said over the course of 3 months, wouldn't it be cool if? And then we said it to enough people where they began to say, well, let's do a feasibility study to see if this could actually happen.
A couple of follow-ups to this. In the Middle East, there are historical cities which had historical buildings. Some of them have been here for hundreds of years. But the urbanization, you compare Cairo, for example, to Jeddah. Cairo still maintains a certain character for that. If you happen to go to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, you can see over there is a very close downtown area that they tried to rebuild, but then everything became urbanized, and one of the reasons for that was the influx of wealth that was in Jeddah versus Cairo, in terms of the resources that were available to the people to do that. United States and Europe. You go to Europe, you find many historical buildings in which they maintain the facade from outside, but then they can renovate it from inside. Coming from the United States, I can see that there's a tendency, especially in big cities like Houston and others, that they set a trend that you just, if anything 10 years old, you demolish it and you build something new. California is very much like that, other than few buildings here and there and so on. What is the message here for this part of the world, number one? Number two, for something like that to happen in the United States, what's the economical feasibility that you have to show that says raising this building is cheaper or not cheap? Or you add the aggregate cost of everything and say that in the long term, it's feasible to take an old building and just reinvent it again.
I think the answer to the first question is really, and how this lecture tonight came about, was thinking about the parallels of the process of our development with what's going on with NYU, Abu Dhabi, and Saadiyat Island. For us, we really, I should say it was our plan all along, but the reality is it wasn't. We didn't have a choice to take a traditional approach with this building in terms of a traditional commercial real estate approach. We knew we were going to have to think outside of the box. And then I'd stumbled upon this idea of urban magnets, and it's a concept that I can't recommend enough, because it switches the focus from building and design and form as that which creates a place to people and the activities of those people. And it's the activities like production, like events and programming, education and retail, all grounded in local culture, that is going to make a place successful over long periods of time. And I began to think about the parallels of the Sears building and here, and I think the message really is that you can't just think about, and this is to me as much as anyone else, you can't think about a building and what's going to be on display there, but also weaving into the fabric of a community opportunities for creativity and innovation. Do you want to be a place that simply displays what other people outside your community have made? Or do you want to be a place that cultivates your people here, to have that creative and innovative spirit? And I think that the way we've gone about developing the Sears building is the latter. We have focused much more on creating opportunities for interchange between artists and teachers and doctors and scientists. This is where the sparks fly. This is where new ideas come. The form is the form. That's not going to change. It may change on the inside, but it's more about how we fill it with people and the uses that they will be engaged in, that they'll be next to each other, and having chance encounters on the stairs or in the cafes or in the bar or whatever that spurs this environment of creativity. And for me, that's the lesson. And maybe it's already in play here, and I just don't know about it. But and because it's not necessarily in American cities either, but it is more and more emerging as creative placemaking is less about the form of the building, more about thinking about the exchanges that go on there, and thinking about creating an environment where innovation can happen. And that's the real, for me, that's the real goal. It's not simply to display wonderful design skills, although that is wonderful, but that's not the only end.
Really fascinating. I'm from Kansas City, a city not so different than Memphis.
That's right.
In many ways. Similar economic pressures, etc. And I've been in Abu Dhabi long enough to understand that it's staggeringly difficult to understand the economic pressures, real estate pressures in the United States cities. Here in Abu Dhabi, the pressures are very different and the opportunities are very different, but the need for community building is not so different. And so what I'm thinking of is that Abu Dhabi almost has the opposite problem. Rather than difficulty in establishing a development, Abu Dhabi, it's very, the economic opportunity is everywhere,
Yep.
and yet there is lack of community in so many heartfelt ways that you've described.
You know, I always say that that's the greatest irony of how this project came about. Because when the economy is up, this is the case in America, everybody's doing fine. Why would I want to try to work with someone else? That's difficult. It's easy to have my organization and only have to worry about my space with my people, etc. And in a down economy in the last 4 years, all you hear is collaboration. How can we share resources? How can we share mission? How can we save costs? So I always say that never in the history of America, well, at least since 1929, is there a ground more fertile for a project such as this. The contrast is that never, or at least in a while, has the environment been so difficult because of the economy to make this project happen. So from a tenant, from a use, from a people perspective, it's prime. From an economic perspective, it's next to impossible.
I'm concerned more about the how-tos, the practicality of it, in terms of having people supporting it financially, and in terms of the management. How is this done?
Yes, great question. And the first answer I'll give you is that fortunately for this project, I'm not in charge of that. I'm an art historian, but I can say it's a $180 million project. Of that $180 million, there are two primary resources. Because of the nature of the building, the historic nature of the building, it qualifies for historic tax credits, which is 20% of your construction costs from the federal government. Because it's in a poor neighborhood, a disinvested neighborhood, the federal government also has what's called new markets tax credits, which are incentives to spur development in areas that need it the most. And so this is another big chunk of that. Then we are fortunate to have some owner equity as well as a lot of philanthropic support. So we actually currently have half the equity already raised for the $180 million project. The rest will be in debt, and the leases will service that debt. In terms of management, there will be a whole management company that is created in order to manage the leases and manage the common spaces and manage all the parking. And on the left here, I didn't even mention, is a 1,200 space parking garage as well. So does that answer your question?
This was very fascinating. See, the question is, you just said that 2,500 to 25 to 3,000 are expected within the day.
Right.
Well, what you're gonna do, after working hours.
Yeah.
So I was just asking
yeah.
if you're gonna if would it help to add some residence or a hotel or something, so it won't be a black hole after working hour.
This is a great question. What I meant to say, or what I should have emphasized more, is that number of 2,500 to 3,000 is during the peak times of the day, so 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. So for example, when there are students at the school, there'll be 500 students in the school. So between those peak times, but that doesn't mean that everybody goes away. The whole point of this development, what we knew we didn't want to do is to create an office park where people come at 9 a.m. and leave at 5 p.m. and then it's dark afterwards. What we wanted to do is to create a place that was active 24/7, 365 days a year. And so we have 250 units of residential that will be in the building, everything from student housing to market rate apartments to some condos as well. There will be activities in the building through the arts and through the wellness center that bring people there from 5 a.m. until midnight every day. So it's going to be a very active village and not something that's just vacated after that. I'm sorry if I misrepresented that.
Could you say a little bit more about how CrossArts will actually work when you're functioning? Because what I'm interested in is, while it's impressive that you've had 8,000 people at your last event, how do you imagine you're going to harness the kind of subversive, explosive nature of things that happen outside a building, and I'm used to this happening in other parts of the world, into a building that will only have 7% of CrossArts amidst residential office and all the other things that can stifle it?
Yep. Another great question. So Crosstown Arts, as one of the 9 founding partners, will be a tenant in the building. So right now, most of the events that have occurred, whether they be lectures or concerts or programs, it's 2 primary goals. One is to support artists and musicians. The other is to bring people back to the community. Well, what happens when bringing people back is no longer an issue, right? That they're just going to be there. So the 3 main components of Crosstown Arts in the building will be, number 1, a exhibition space for contemporary art, about 10,000 square feet. Number 2, we will have a multidisciplinary artist residency program, which will bring 15 to 20 artists from around the world to Memphis. From either 2 weeks to 3 months. It's a program based on application where they are given room and board, like I said, and a place to make their work in return for engaging the community through lectures or exhibitions or in community involvement somehow. The third component, which I'm most excited about, we have 5 higher education institutions in Memphis, all of which have arts programming. We graduate between 150 and 250 students in the arts a year in Memphis. When you're in a university or an art school and you have access to all of the resources of that institution, you've been trained to use these and to make your work, but then you leave the institution. You're an emerging artist and you don't have access to all of those resources anymore. How do you make your work? How do you make the work that you've been trained to make? Well, what we're going to do is similar to in the US, here too I'm sure, you pay $40 a month to have access to a gym where you would have access to workout equipment that you couldn't either you couldn't afford or don't have the space to have. We're going to create a shared art making labs with full professional wood and metal workshops, digital media labs, a small recording studio, where people can pay a fee, $40, $50 a month, to have access to all of these things. We'll also have studios around that, which will hopefully, and we know through our research and through all of the activities that we've had the last 2 years, that there's a huge need for that in Memphis. We end up losing a huge portion of our young creative talent to other cities because of the lack of what I call cultural infrastructure. Those things that provide opportunities to people to express their creativity. And so that will also bring people through these resources. So the hope is that not only will we have exhibition space, but we'll also bring people there as a result. The last thing I'll say is that all of the founding partners have agreed to allow Crosstown Arts to be the curator of their spaces. So not only will we have space in the exhibition, but the common spaces and in the spaces of the founding partners will be curating the art that's displayed in their areas. So it's a real attempt to try to integrate what we're doing as Crosstown Arts with the other founding partners.
I wonder if this is still owned by Sears or
No.
if there's another owner. How did you work out, how did you convince the owner to go for this project? And how did you work out the investment issue with him or with them? I don't know who they are.
The owner purchased the building in 2007. The building was originally sold by Sears to a New York investment company in 2000. For those of you that know anything about real estate prices, you'll appreciate this. The New York investment company paid $1.5 million for 1.5 million square feet. And so then the current owner bought it from them in 2007 for a whopping $3.3 million. And to this day, he says he got duped. He paid way too much for it. And so, the cost of redeveloping this building from a per square foot standpoint is not any different than any other buildings downtown that were built around the same time. The issue is there's so many square feet for Memphis, for a smaller market. And so no one could figure out what to do with it. And so in terms of convincing him, we were about the only game in town in terms of trying to figure out what to do with it. And he's also a very civic-minded individual. So for him, this whole project is about adding something to the city that's going to make it better. So it's not necessarily a profit kind of situation for him. He knows actually he's going to lose a lot of money on it, but at the same time, it's going to be better for Memphis, and so he's engaging in it.
My question is about the role of local government. I understand you have quite a difficult site actually to deal with and a building to bring people to, but could you please clarify to us what is the role of the local government trying probably to help you in terms of creating vitality to the site by bringing probably upgrading infrastructure or probably helping in routing some transit route, things like that, that can actually help this to succeed. I know you mentioned Vancouver, Granville Island, the site there is right there in the middle of the city, and it's a prime location, although it's an industrial site. So how could you try to create some conditions around the site to make it successful other than finding the right tenants?
That's right. No, we really should add the city of Memphis as a 10th founding partner, because that's the reality, even though it's not up there. We've worked really closely with the city for the last year. They will help in a number of ways. Number one, as you said, this building was built as a distribution center. It had 1,500 people working in it, but it was a place that stored goods. And so what we're going to be adaptively reusing it, for is something very different. And so from water to gas to sewage, electricity, all of those things, all of the infrastructure is going to have to be upgraded. And not just in the building, but around the building as well. The street's going to have to be changed, sidewalks, the street lighting, all of these things are going to have to be upgraded, which they've committed to doing. The other thing that they'll be helpful with is remediation, environmental, so asbestos and lead paint. There's not a lot, but there's some. They can also be helpful with demolition, with the parking garage, those things that impact the public. So this huge parking area in front of the building will become a public plaza, landscape, hardscape, all of that, but that's a huge amenity for the city, so they can help with that as well. The other thing is that this project is going to force the city code beyond its current state, and so there are going to be lots of looking the other way and lots of changes that need to happen, and whether that's through city council or whatever, so they're going to have to be involved in that as well, and then advocating on our behalf for state and federal funding as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've come to the end of tonight's fascinating lecture and fantastic questions also that were as inspiring as Todd Richardson's presentation. I want to add two personal things before I invite you to go to the place behind our space here and enjoy some drinks and some food. Two personal remarks. Todd was once a student of mine, and I see students sitting here from NYUAD Abu Dhabi. I can just tell you how kind of proud I am, although I'm really not involved, to see Todd standing here. I'm looking up to him and seeing how fantastic he is doing, and how, as an art historian or someone who takes, even in our curriculum, visual arts could be attractive, we could take how far you can get beyond your original field your original major in your undergraduate studies, while still retaining some of the original seeds of that into these marvelous projects. The second is that I find a lot of inspiration, I think I can say on behalf of NYU Abu Dhabi in this project, and I can imagine, as it seems to come to the fore in some of your questions, that Todd's project, the project of his whole team, could be indeed of some inspiration to this very city. So join me please in thanking Todd for this great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.